Hey everybody, LuAnn from EveryStem here, and I have Hylary who is a floral designer based in the Bay Area of California. She's in Gilroy, California, and she has been a member of EveryStem for just about 2.5 years. In fact, she was the 10th person to sign up for our software. So today we're going to learn a little bit more about Hylary, what she does for her wedding business that is H&J Flowers, and just talking to her a little bit about, what EveryStem has done for her business, how she uses it, and what the issues are as floral designers that we have with pricing and ordering, and how a system like EveryStem can help you as well. So thank you for being here, Hylary.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we talked about that you're based in California and that
Yes.
you're doing mostly weddings and events, but tell us a little bit about your business and, a little bit about what you do and how it's evolved over the years.
Yeah. My business got started purely accidentally. I had a whole career. I had gone to grad school and everything before I even knew that I was interested in flowers. I got started doing it for friends and family just because I was a crafty person and I loved it. My prior career was I was a librarian for about 18 years. I worked in libraries. So believe it or not, that I did a lot of like crafting and things for that, working with the community. So I sort of was familiar with how to learn how to do different things to teach people. So I learned how to do flowers. This was all the way back in 2011, just very basic for family and friends. And then more people started recommending me to do things for other people. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. Started the business with my husband, Jason, because he was always very involved in everything we were doing. And then eventually decided to just go full time working for myself rather than working for the county, which is what I was doing as a librarian. And here we are. So I think just having started in working in a field like libraries was kind of what drew me to being very organized in the business. So when I first was starting to do ordering and everything like that for doing weddings, obviously I had no idea what I was doing. I did a lot of things on hand. I kind of learned over the years, took classes and things. I started to sort of make my own spreadsheets and whatnot for ordering because I always sort of realized that was the most important aspect of the business, was knowing what to order and everything like that for financial purposes. Like it's all great to show up with dozens of flowers, but if you're throwing most of them away, there's not really a point. It's more like a hobby. So when I first saw EveryStem, it was basically, I had created this kind of wonky spreadsheet system on Excel that I had been using for a couple of years that took forever. And it was basically that, but very, very fast. So I think that's why I was number 10 to join, because it sort of spoke to my librarian heart of being like very organized and delineated and everything. So it's just been super helpful in terms of running, like as a business owner, running the business. It's helps me feel more comfortable, and because doing flowers is kind of an art form, and that way I'm able to be relaxed while I'm actually working and not worried about, do I have enough of this, so I can focus more on the work and creating beautiful arrangements, because that's the part that I really like the most. So I think that's just kind of how it's become an integral part of what we do. But yeah, I mean, our focus in our business is definitely being super organized, kind of being the vendor that you can always look to, that knows what's going on, is easy to get in touch with, has a clear pricing, format and everything. So it's just very, very crucial to being able to offer like really excellent customized service for the clients by knowing exactly what we're getting and being confident in our pricing and everything like that. So we do we do just usually a couple of weddings a weekend. So it's very helpful for that. We're still very small. It's me and my husband. We have a co-designer, Jackie, and then some assistants and things like that work with us. So we're still very small but mighty. And
Yeah, definitely. Get a
love
lot
what
done
we
with just
do.
a few people, right?
Yes, but it's being the fact that we are so organized and so just confident in what we're doing and feel like nothing's chaotic or anything like that, I think is really helpful, especially when we're small, to be able to just deliver every time. So that's kind of what we do.
That's awesome. I think that from my experience, having owned my own flower shop and then working for other people now, I find that it is really an interesting thing when you go into a business and you can see that the person who is in charge is very organized and on top of
Yes.
things, or whoever's in charge of, being organized. It might not be necessarily be the owner. There might
Yeah.
be another person who's taken that role of being like the main organizer, but
Mhm.
it makes everything run so much more smoothly.
Yes.
And on top of that, in our field, in our industry, there's always going to be things that pop up,
Mhm.
things that go wrong or things that change, whether it's from the flower side where, maybe product isn't right or isn't usable or isn't available, or maybe it's from the client side where there's stress or there's emotions running high.
Yes.
Maybe from the planner side who's kind of adding stress or kind of throwing
Mhm.
things at us. So the more organized we can be in what we do and how we run our businesses, that just opens up the
Mhm.
opportunity for us to be able to handle all those things that we know are probably going to
Yes.
be thrown at us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the clients can really sense it. I mean, like it's for me, I think if I go into a restaurant and the staff is all chaotic, like I can definitely tell. So,
Mhm.
if you're, this is someone's most special day, they want to feel like the person knows what they're doing and is, forthcoming with all the information and has everything organized and is on top of everything. So I feel like that's really important. I mean, you can be the most talented floral designer ever, but if it takes you 3 weeks to answer an email, it doesn't, no one's going to want to hire you. So,
Yep, exactly. You'll lose out to the person who
yes.
responds sooner.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so before you started using EveryStem in your business, you were, doing recipes by hand at first, which I'm
Yeah.
sure leaves a lot of room for human error and mistakes.
Yes.
And then you got into Excel. So tell us a
Yes.
little bit about how you did that before and some of the issues that you felt while you were using those systems that kind of, when you saw EveryStem, made you think, oh, I could definitely maybe try something different.
Yeah. Yeah, well, doing it by hand was obviously very rudimentary. I was still, when I first started doing flowers, was working as librarian at the same time, and I had young kids. So it was sort of like a couple times a month type of thing. So doing it by hand wasn't that big of a deal. But as I started doing it more regularly, that became very, very cumbersome. And I would make mistakes and, I wouldn't know, I would have miscounted over here. I mean, I'm not a mathematician or anything like that. So that made it really difficult. And then when I had gone to grad school to be a librarian, I had to learn about Excel and forms and all those things. So I just thought, well, why don't I kind of put that to use for the business? And I had taken the flower math course through Allison, and that sort of helped me come up with percentages and profitability and everything like that. So I
Yep.
sort of rolled that into my Excel spreadsheet, but that just took, because I had made it myself, it took a very long time to input all the numbers. And it was very accurate, but it was just very time consuming.
Yeah.
So when I first heard about EveryStem, I think it was, I want to say on Facebook, and I kind of did a little tour of it, and it was basically the exact same thing that I had made, just very easy. I liked that it incorporated the same format as the flower math that I had taken, and it just was a kind of a no-brainer for me to use it. So it is like simplified and sped up the process just exponentially. Like I would be up late, typing on Excel. I mean, I'm sure people are much more skilled at Excel than I am and could make something that's super. I am not that person. I can just do basic formulas on there. So
Right.
I just kind of type everything in, add the flowers, figure out the cost for each flower, and da 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 da. So this just makes it so much easier. I like that everything is stored on there. I have all of my product kind of delineated in my library by season and things like that. So it's just very, very quick. I want to say it takes me maybe, I don't know, it depends on how distracted I get by my kids or something, but maybe like 15, 20 minutes to do an order for a full wedding versus like 2 hours or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
just,
So if you're doing multiple weddings in a week,
yes.
and
Yes.
you're saving from 2 hours down to 20 minutes. That's, that could
Oh,
be
it's
up to
huge.
five
It's
hours a
huge.
week or something that
Yeah.
you're saving.
At the least, I mean, at the very least. And also it's nice to be able to see things kind of in real time as I'm inputting recipes. I'm fairly good at knowing if I'm going to go over on something, like maybe I'm, giving a discount or, whatever, but it's nice to see if I'm just going way off the rails with wanting to have something have 75,000 hydrangeas in it, and it lets me know like you can't really do that. So it's nice to have that real time feedback, I guess, which was not the case with my little Excel spreadsheet, and certainly not the case when I did it by hand, because that
Yeah,
was,
exactly. Yeah. When you're
yeah,
doing it by hand, like it's almost an afterthought, right?
yes.
To try to put in all that information. So you're building all the recipes
Mhm.
and then you're going in and doing those hand calculations.
Yeah.
And with Excel, kind of that same thing. You're kind of like working through it. But with EveryStem, as you build each recipe, you're seeing that profitability and
Yes.
looking at the whole thing. So
Absolutely.
being able to look at it that way is, I think, a lot of people's favorite. So I'm glad that you're saying that too, between that and like a few other features of how it works. But
Yeah.
you know that when you first started, you had worked with Allison Ellis through her flower math
Mhm.
course. And if anybody's interested, Allison Ellis has a Facebook group called Real Flower Business. And that's her website as well. I think it's realflowerbusiness.com.
Yeah.
And she is a coach for florists specifically. And she teaches an amazing course. It's online. You can just do it in your own time, called Flower Math. And
Mhm.
EveryStem, one of the reasons that Allison loves using EveryStem, and because she teaches the flower math in
Mhm.
kind of the same way that EveryStem calculates it. And it really
Exactly.
is the fundamentally, I know people don't love the word, I can't remember, industry standard pricing, but it is a way to ensure that you are maximizing your profitability and not
Yes.
just thinking about, oh, okay, I have $1,000 wedding, I can spend $300 or I have to spend $300.
Yeah.
The thought process is, if you can do a beautiful wedding and spend $275 and make that extra $25, every little bit counts. So if anybody's out
Sure.
there trying to learn about how EveryStem calculates the math, or if you'd like to learn how to do it for yourself so that you just understand as a business owner how it works, flower math can kind of help you learn that. And that's how Hylary learned it at first and then kind of came over to
Yes.
them.
Flower math was very, very crucial for knowing how to price, and especially too with EveryStem, once you start having, like, we have a lot of inventory that we use. So it's very, very, I mean, I wasn't even really factoring that in to my other formats that I was using for recipes and things. So
Right.
that's just very crucial if you're starting to, I mean, not hoard, I wouldn't say is what I do, but maybe a little bit different bases and things like that. You want to include that in the calculation. So that's been very important too.
Yeah, I think adding the hard goods can be very
Yes.
hard when your hard goods or supplies, whatever anybody, I think in the UK, a lot of our florist members call it sundries.
Yeah.
Anything that you're adding that's not a flower,
Mhm.
that when you're putting in the vase or the candles or the chicken wire or, anything like that you're using, a flower frog, that's a cost.
Mhm.
And we need to be calculating those costs, whether they're something that's taking you time or something
Mhm.
that actually costs you money, that's a physical item, ribbon or tape or pins. Even
Mhm.
those things are very small items. If we're
Yeah.
not kind of adding those into our pricing, that can really erode our profit margin a lot. So
Yeah.
now that you've been using EveryStem for over about 2.5 years,
Mhm.
do you feel like, because you're including those items, you're using a system that kind of does all that math for you, that shows you if you're going over budget, do you feel like, even though you were pretty good about calculating that beforehand, do you feel like your profitability is better now
Oh,
using
way
the
better.
system?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very rare if our profit margin is above, or we almost always hit that 70-30 that Allison talks about in flower math.
Yeah.
Occasionally there'll be some kind of issue where, something happens with the flowers and we have to spend a little bit more, but it's very, very rare that we go over that, just because we are very conscious of that type of thing. And there's no guesswork. Like, we know where absolutely everything's going. So I think that makes a huge difference with profitability, especially with having, because we recently brought a new full-time person on this year. So being to be able to support them, being to pay someone else is like a huge deal when you're used to doing it all on your own. So that's even more crucial to be very careful. And it's definitely made it possible for us to do that, especially with multiple weddings every, weekend. To do that every time, I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And I think that's because you're using the system. So what I find very interesting from a perspective of the person who has created this system is looking at how people use it. And EveryStem is a pretty flexible program, and different florists use it in different ways. But I think the main thing is really making it something that you use for every flower order or for every event that you're doing if you're an event florist. And that way, when you're looking at it, you don't feel the fear, which maybe you've probably felt this in the past, maybe not, but at the end of the year, maybe before you were using EveryStem, when you were doing it by hand or using Excel, when it came time to kind of roll up all the numbers at the end of the year and look at the actual, what do I have to pay in taxes? What did I actually make? There's like this level of fear saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what these numbers are going to look like. But using EveryStem, if you use it for every event or every wedding or every order, if you're not a wedding florist and you're doing retail, does it make you feel like, oh, I don't have to be afraid? Like, I know that I'm going to be profitable.
Very much. Yeah, definitely. Especially, I mean, not only at the end of the year, but just throughout the entire time. Like, the last thing we want to worry about is, do I need to get 10 more roses or whatever it is? It's just the level of anxiety that goes away with having everything so clearly laid out and having all those percentages and records basically kept all year long is very crucial.
Definitely. I totally agree with that. So one of the things that I would love for you to do for people who are interested in using EveryStem, or some of our new members who are watching this, I'd love for you to walk us through, as an experienced floral designer who's been doing this for quite a few years, what is your process from the very beginning, meeting with a client or getting an inquiry, all the way through to like the delivery day?
Sure.
How you kind of handle that, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of our newer members and some of the florists who are just getting into the industry would love to understand, like, what's the best process? And I know people do it differently, but I'd love for you to share what works for you guys after you've been established and you're doing multiple weddings every weekend.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I mean, it all starts with the inquiry. We have, our website has a very kind of, like I said, organized is my favorite word, form that the client fills out. We do a phone consultation with all the clients. We make them a very customized proposal after that, just with, I include kind of a lot more information, I think, than a lot of people normally do on proposals, just because I like to be very organized and upfront and let them know kind of exactly what they're getting. Pricing is all included on there. Everything is delineated of what's going where and descriptions, all of that. So they get that usually within about a week to a week and a half. We'll get that back to them. I get the initial quote to them as quickly as possible, because I think that, like I said, you can have the most beautiful proposal ever, but if it's going to take a really long time, people are just not going to wait for that. So I try to get that done quickly. And then if they move forward with us, of course, they sign, do the deposit, all that stuff. And from there, I mean, obviously there's a wait time in between the signing and the wedding. So typically what we do is I will get the EveryStem stuff process started about 2 months-ish prior to the wedding, and start to get the recipes all squared away, input their contract, and then I'll do a check-in with them and make sure everything's still correct on their end. One of the things that I really like about EveryStem, and I'm sure other people have experienced this, is a lot of the time people will change their mind about a color or a flower, or they want to add this or that. So it's very easy to change that around. if they've decided, their bridesmaids are wearing blue instead of blush and they want to do, blue delphinium instead of white delphinium or something, it's very easy to change that. So I like that a lot. And I mentioned earlier, but on my library that I've, and getting the library established was something that took some time, but it wasn't super crazy time consuming. And if there's new flowers that I'm adding to my library, that's very easy to do. If there's a new rose that I like or something, I just go throughout the year and add kind of all my favorites. So my library is pretty comprehensive at this point, but I have things separated by season, which is also really nice. If they, not so much anymore, but back during COVID times, people were changing seasons a lot because they were postponing. So it was easy for me to swap that out as well if they had to have ranunculus, but it was not the time or something like that. So
Yep.
I'll get everything kind of preliminarily put into EveryStem. And then I do a check-in with them about a month and a half prior to the wedding, get everything all squared away. And then I order my flowers 30 days in advance of the wedding.
Okay.
Which, according to my wholesalers, I'm like one of the first ones to do it. I'm always like the early bird. But again, I feel like being the early bird on things has proven to be very like a good thing for me because I really get everything that I ask for, especially some of those hot items that everyone wants, like quicksand roses or something like that. If you're asking for those a week and a half before your wedding and it's in June, I'm not sure if they're going to get there. So I think having everything kind of preloaded and ready to go, I'm able to kind of hit the send button on everything very quickly and easily. So then, I get my flower order in 30 days in advance. We always pick up on either Monday or Tuesday for the week, and we get everything processed. We go through the list on EveryStem. One thing, probably one of my most favorite things about EveryStem is the extras line, so that if something comes in damaged, because there's always something damaged, I know exactly how many more I have left to kind of supplement that. So I'll go through and make sure that I have sufficient, depending on if there is a bunch or something that comes in damaged, I will know exactly how many more I have. So we kind of go through that when we're processing in the studio. We get everything nice and, happy, cozy, depending on what it is. If it wants to be in the cooler, but it's very nice to know exactly what we have and exactly how many extras we have and everything like that. It's just very nice. So throughout the week, we do the designing. We go through we have our little recipes that we fight over the papers. And LuAnn mentioned earlier when we were talking about, I'm always getting the papers wet in the studio. So I'm going to do some kind of lamination technique to keep that from happening.
Yes, I think you should try that. Let me know how it goes.
Well, so me and my co-designer and any of our assistants that are working with us just share the recipe cards so we know exactly what to do, and we delegate who does what, who's making bridesmaids, all of that stuff. So generally, it's very, very rare that we're actually making something for a wedding that morning or something like that. Back in the old days when I first started, I felt like I was making everything that day, but having everything organized, we're able to, get everything done. There's no rushing. There's no any of that stuff. We're never behind or having to scramble to make things last minute. So that's pretty much the process leading up to delivery. We're, again, very organized with delivery. We like to have as much time as possible if we can to get everything set up. There's generally 2 or 3 of us at each event, and we show up. We have everything organized, labeled, ready to go. So it's easy to just put things where they need to go on the day, depending on the event. I mean, we work at so many different types of venues. We're at farms or wineries or in the woods or by the beach, all over the place. That's California for you. Yep. So it really, each week is very different, which is part of the fun of it. But it's nice to be able to sort of customize the process depending on what we need. If it's a really candle heavy wedding, we'll have all of that sort of laid out, or whatever the case is. And I like, especially with EveryStem, that I can customize things based on the hard goods like we were talking about, because that, at least for us, has become kind of a large part of what we do if there's a lot of candles or things like that. So we keep the little recipe cards from from EveryStem with us. I put them in our kit when we go. So we have everything for an installation. For example, if we're doing an arch, we know exactly how many of this, that, and the others going there versus how much is going, on the fireplace or whatever it is. So they come with us. Our little papers come with us. By the end of the week, they're like all crinkly and
you're like, okay, these are going.
It's all good. Yeah.
And it's saved in the system, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
I know. But it's nice too to be able to have the hard copy, because sometimes there's just no reception. So if we're in a place where there's no reception, for example, 2 weeks ago, I had a wedding where there was 4 of us setting up, and it's a very large venue. There's no reception. We did have walkie-talkies, but who has the walkie-talkie at that given moment?
Right.
So I was over here doing something, working on a large installation, and then the rest of our team was over here doing garlands. So I gave them the cards and was like, just go down the list and add to each garland exactly what's on here.
Yep.
And it was very easy for them to do that. So that's why I like to bring those things with me and have it handy. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works from start to finish. Just organization, getting things done early. That's the biggest advice I could ever give to anybody, is just be organized. Don't procrastinate anything ever, like nothing. Get it all as early as you can.
Yeah. And ordering early, I think, is a big thing, because, if you communicate with your wholesalers, and I'm not exactly sure, I know you probably have some really good relationships with your wholesalers because you've been a florist for a while now and you know what you're doing. But I always harp on people that tell me, I send in an order and I just cross my fingers and I hope the best. What we need to do as floral designers, and you probably do this, is, communicate with the wholesalers saying, this is what I need. Like you said, you have different kind of lingo with your different wholesalers. And you say to them, there's nothing wrong with saying to your wholesaler, this is what I need. This is the price I'm expecting or hoping to pay. If you cannot get this, let me know as soon as possible so that we can, as a team, work for finding a new solution that's going to be just as good for our budget and what our client needs. And I think that's something that florists who are maybe a little more either, introverted, maybe, and I know our personalities can kind of change and things, but, people who are a little bit less, you feel like that's being too assertive or whatever, but the wholesaler reps are really there to help us.
Yes.
They're there to get us what we need. So I think, using that, working with them as people who are supposed to help us can be really good. So you placing your orders early and kind of communicating with them what your expectations are probably helps a lot through.
I'm sure. Well, and my wholesalers they really they've told me that they like me because I'm consistent. I'm not rude. I've seen, I don't know, it's a thing where I've seen people be a little bit rude and I just don't get it. That's not my deal. So
no, you get more with honey than we do with vinegar, right?
Yeah. And I don't throw any like crazy curveballs at them and then get mad when they can't do it kind of thing. Like they know that my order is going to be very clear. It's very like, exactly. They're fortunately, and I mean, it depends on where you live, I guess. Luckily in this area, we have a lot of wholesalers to choose from. There's some where they're a little bit like weird about pricing and it might change for this person versus that person or whatever. So I go to those people because I want consistency. So finding the right people to work with, I think, is really good. People that seem to be, customer service oriented rather than trying to make as much money as they can. So generally with my wholesalers that I use, their pricing is fairly consistent. And if there is some weird outlier, they know me well enough that they'll let me know, oh, this is super expensive this week. Are you sure you want to get that? And then I can decide from that point. But yeah, treating your wholesaler properly is like, I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want to do that, and I am an introverted person. I mean, I was a librarian, introverted, but yeah, I just, you have to be kind, but clear, like there's no other way to do it. And I think that having everything early gives them the chance to let me know if there's an issue. Even sometimes a couple weeks in advance, if there's an issue, they'll let me know. Like, oh, we're here, you know. So if you're waiting until the last minute and then you're sending a kind of chaotic, schizophrenic order, and then you're getting mad at them that they can't do it, I don't see how that's like a recipe for success ever.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is part of our job, is to really make sure that we're setting up those expectations for our flower
Mhm.
orders. You know, I've heard
Yeah.
from several designers in the past year and a half who have said, oh, well, I just give the wholesaler a budget and I just let them decide.
Oh gosh.
I think as a floral designer, you know, the client is relying on you to decide what those flowers are going to be and
Yeah.
how that's going to come together. And so I think it is a really important part. And as you said earlier, to kind of like go back to one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you said, was that having recipes and thinking through this process ahead of time, whether you're using a system like EveryStem or you are doing it by hand, I think EveryStem is going to help speed that up and simplify it, make sure you're doing it right. But doing that ahead of time allows you more creative freedom while you're designing. So I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on that and how recipes really allow you to be more creative. Because I think a lot of people interpret recipes as something that limits creativity.
Yes.
But I don't believe that. I believe what you believe. I think they really open up a lot of opportunity for creativity.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as, for me, a big part of being able to design and everything is my mindset. If I am nervous or agitated or thinking about something else, I'm not going to design as well, because it's an art form. I mean, it is like anyone can just get a vase and just stick things in it. But if you're designing something that's special, that's going to be something that's memorable for people on their most special day, and they want everything to look beautiful and, you know, thoughtful, you need to be in the right headspace. So for me, that is a huge part of the creative process, just in and of itself. But I understand that with recipes, there's some level of, well, what if I see this fun thing and I want to get it and add it to my arrangement? And I will actually leave a tiny bit of wiggle room just in case there is something that, when I go to my wholesaler, or because we shop locally a lot at farms and things, if they happen to have some really cool thing in that week and I want to get, you know, 4 or 5 bunches of it, I've kind of worked that in there so that there is some wiggle room for some kind of fun, creative thing. But to me, you know, creativity is great, but when you're delivering something where you're having like 20 of the exact same thing, just only being creative and not being organized and thoughtful in your pricing is, to me, kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. Like, you can be creative, but if you don't have enough stuff, it's not going to work. Or if you have the wrong product, like if it's going to be 95 degrees out and you're telling the wholesaler, well, just give me whatever, who knows if it's even going to be what's proper for that. So I'll even factor that into my recipes depending on the season. If the wedding is outside in a windy place, I'm not going to put chocolate cosmos all over the place, because they're going to blow away. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So I understand the idea that, yeah, there is some level of it would be nice to just show up at the flower market and just magically everything you want is there in the right quantity and the right color, and it's so magical, and there's fairies and butterflies, but that, you know, it's a business. So I think of it like that. I leave a little bit of room for me to kind of have creativity with it, but also I need to advocate for my client and make sure that they get what they think they're going to get in the quantity, and then it's going to be high quality, and it's going to last, and it's going to be appropriate for their venue or the environment or whatever it is. So for me, it's kind of a balance of wanting to be really creative and whimsical and fun and just fly by the seat of my pants, but also I need to deliver what I've been paid to deliver. And I think it would be fun to just do the send me whatever for this budget thing for like a styled shoot or something. Like, I sometimes like to do those because that's my opportunity to really go wild and just kind of do whatever. But for the normal clients, like, they, you know, that they're not really going to appreciate that as much if half their stuff is dying, or, you know.
Right. You have to live up to that client expectation for sure.
Yes,
That's the most
exactly.
important thing, number one. I mean, you know, when I had my flower business, we did lots of weddings, even though we were also a retail shop. we did probably 60% of our business was wedding work. And, we had a very kind of particular clientele. I felt like,
Yeah.
some of my friends who have flower businesses, they seem to have a little bit lighter, easier going clientele. But for some reason, my business attracted more particular clients. And so for
Mhm.
me, being able to really pinpoint what they love, and it sounds similar
Yes.
to what you were saying, you go to extra lengths at the beginning of the process to talk to them about what they're looking for,
Yes.
give them that customized relationship, give them that super great customer service.
Mhm.
And then because we're giving them all of that on the front end, we need to make sure that we're living up to it through our design work,
Yes.
which is prepared through recipes. And then we're
Yes.
also making sure we're making a healthy enough profit to warrant all that work we did on
Mhm.
the front end.
Exactly.
And the way to do that is through looking at that summary page on EveryStem,
Yes.
making sure we've got our profit margin right. And as you mentioned, I know you said when you're looking at building each individual recipe, in EveryStem, when you build a recipe, if you go over your budget based on your markup and your fees, it will change to a negative and change to a
Mhm.
different color if you're
Yeah,
over
mine
budget.
turns red.
Yeah. And so it
Yeah.
tells you
Mhm.
that you went over. And I know you were saying, you're like, I don't like when that happens.
No, 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 no. I don't like that at all. I mean, it's kind of a competition with myself. And I like this. I'll toggle back and forth between the summary page and things as well, just to kind of make sure. The
Mhm.
other too is the charge for the extras. That was such a hard thing to figure out when I was doing it on my own was, if I add an additional rose to every centerpiece, I'm going to actually have to buy like an extra entire bunch that I don't really need. So
Yep.
that's very important. And then if you are hitting those margins, like I said, to be creative, if there's a little, like if I'm at I have 2% extra or something like that, then that day I can go and find if there's like a bunch of really beautiful David Austin roses or something in the exact right color palette, I have money left to get that for
Yep.
the bride and have it be like a special treat. But I don't want the entire wedding, some of these weddings we're having, they can have a 6-figure budget. I don't want the whole thing to just be like, oh, I like this, or I like, there needs to be some structure. And then you can have those extra fun things if it fits in with the budget. That's just kind of how I look at it. Because,
Yep.
otherwise it's more of a hobby than a way I'm supporting my family,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we all start our flower businesses for different reasons.
Yeah.
But when we start a business, one of the reasons is because we want to make money.
Mhm.
We're here to do that. And a lot of us, because we love flowers and we're kind of, naturally, a lot of florists, I think, are giving people, they're caring
Yeah.
people. You don't really get into being a florist if you're like, I don't care about much,
No.
So we want our clients to be happy. We want to really go above and beyond. But there is that point of like, that value perception of saying,
Mhm.
if I buy this one more bunch of flowers, if I have 23 extra roses in my EveryStem summary page, and I'm looking at how many extras I have,
Mhm.
but I also have 5 extra snapdragons and 5 extra stock and 6 extra anemones. When you look down at the bottom of that summary page and you see how much those extras total up to, that's the number that, as you were mentioning, when you were doing it by hand and you were doing it on Excel, you
Yeah.
didn't have access to like, how much are all these extras adding up
Oh,
to?
they can add up so much.
Yeah. And that can add, um, if you're lowering that extras cost, it can increase your profit margin by several percentage points.
Mhm.
And then you can say, okay, well, I still have 6 extra snapdragons and 5 extra stock and 3 extra anemones, but now I eliminated those 23 extra
Yeah.
roses that were maybe $1.80 a stem, and
Yeah.
that can make a big difference in
Huge.
those final numbers. So do you
Especially
feel
too
like
with
that?
that. Yeah, the consolidated export feature where it kind of compiles that if you're having, because sometimes we'll have like 2 weddings in the same weekend with the same color palette. So
Yep.
it's nice because it'll do the math of like this extra and that extra can combine, and then you don't need to buy that extra bunch because this wedding's extras are kind of covering that little bit. So I like that too because it makes it so, I mean, I like white and blush, and it's just kind of what we,
Yeah,
do.
we all do a lot of white and blush. Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of nice to say, if we are needing to buy, we're gonna have 23 extra roses for this, that will cover some of this other one's quicksands that they needed or whatever it is. So I like that too, because
Yeah,
it thinks of all of that for me, and I don't have to go through and figure it out on my own.
exactly. Trying to calculate that by hand. I mean, when I
Yes.
first started with my flower business, my previous owner who sold me the shop, she did everything by hand. And literally, we had multiple weddings every weekend. We had all these other events and daily orders and things. And I was just like, there's no way. So we went to Excel as well and started
Yeah.
working in Excel. And then basically EveryStem is based off of that Excel spreadsheet that I used to
Mhm.
use. And I remember trying to combine, multiple weddings into one order. And I would always make mistakes.
Yeah,
And
me
the
too.
wholesaler would catch it a lot of times, which I was really grateful for because I had a good relationship with my main wholesaler. But the consolidated order feature, for those of you who don't know, Hilary's mentioning, it will take multiple flower orders. So if you build all your recipes for a wedding on a Friday, and then you have another wedding on Saturday, and you build all your recipes for that wedding, EveryStem will automatically combine those for you through this consolidated export that we have. And if you're buying 3 stems of spray roses for wedding A, and you only need 4 stems of the same spray rose for wedding B, instead of ordering 2 bunches, EveryStem will consolidate those orders and tell you to only order 1. So a feature like that probably has
Really nice.
saved you some money just from not
Big
buying too
time.
many. Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. And I think before that feature was available on EveryStem, I would go through and kind of check it, but it's just so much easier to have it do it automatically. Anything that can just happen automatically, I'm very, very big on that.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to give a shout out to Ashley at Good Earth Floral, because she is the floral designer who decided that she really needed that feature, and she really championed it with us. And so I'm so glad, because she has a pretty big business with lots of employees, and she's like, we do lots of weddings each weekend, we need this.
Yes.
And it can be helpful, even if you only do, I know for your business, you're doing multiple weddings a lot of weekends, but even for smaller businesses, if you're only doing it, maybe once every couple months, it still saves a lot of money, especially if you have a similar color palette.
Every little bit saved helps. I mean, it all adds up. Like, it doesn't seem, I mean, at least to me, and my husband does the finances of the business, so he is kind of like this, comes in and, but 2% over on this or whatever, over the course of the year, it's going to add up to thousands. So it's important. I think those little tiny things that don't seem like a big deal, when you put them all together, really can make a big impact.
Yeah, it really does. The profitability is a huge factor in that. And I think kind of seeing that on the screen can be a little frightening for floral designers at the beginning. Because you might put in your first event or, a couple of events and see that you're not at the profit margin that you really want to be at.
Oh, yeah.
But knowing that you can get to that point using the system, is kind of one of those things that can be super helpful, because we all, knowing that, if you're not as profitable as you want to be and you're watching this video, just know that when you use a system like EveryStem, it can really empower you to look at that on the screen and say, okay, this wedding isn't where I want it to be, but next time I'm going to price higher, I'm going to order a little less, and I'm going to get to that profit margin that I really want to hit, so that, it can be a progression. It doesn't have to be on day one that you're.
Oh no, I want to say my first like 6 months of using it, because all my contracts were older, everything was red. Everything was red. Because I didn't, even with my Excel, I was still not doing it right. But now everything is not red anymore. And it just,
everything is in the black. Yes.
Yes, everything's in the black. Occasionally there'll be something in the red if it's, but it's very, very rare. And it just took time of using it and getting that feedback. And so it's kind of like, if I'm, ordering for a wedding that's coming up in a month, and I'm doing a quote for a wedding next year, I can say, oh, I needed to actually add another $20 to this thing. I'm going to do that next time. So it kind of all rolls together to create, at this point now I'm able to be in the black on all of them because I was in the red in the beginning and learned not to do that anymore.
Yeah. And that is a process. I think a lot of times we kind of tend to get a little bit frustrated and, we kind of, it's like you see that and there's two options. You can have the fight or the flight, and if you choose to fight through it and say, okay, these weddings that I've priced in the past, and now I'm using EveryStem and I have this goal of this certain profit margin, or I have this goal of this certain markup that I want to achieve, like Hilary's saying, if you can push through and accept the fact that, okay, these aren't exactly where I want to be right now, but the only way to get to the profitability that Hilary's experiencing in her business is to work through those weddings, keep increasing your pricing, keep, staying on budget and doing the recipes and working that system so that you can then get to that point. Yeah.
It doesn't just happen like overnight, unfortunately. It would be nice if it did, but it doesn't.
Right. But you say it took you about maybe 6 months to work kind of
Yeah,
through.
well, so I mean, it was hard because it was COVID too. So some people were so postponed that there was some that happened because I started using EveryStem in 2021. So I would say I started using it in the spring, and then in the fall when I was making quotes for the 2022, they were not in the red anymore, but there was still some in 2022 that were old. And, I was like, oh, this is, a postponement thing. So
yeah,
it was actually kind of, I could see it juxtaposed in that way because I had some old and some new simultaneously because of COVID. But yeah, it took me, I mean, I could obviously see it right away, but there was nothing I can do about it until I was making quotes for the following year. And then, 2022. And then obviously this year, where there's no problems like that anymore.
That's great. Yeah. And there was a lot of pricing fluctuations during COVID
oh
too.
Gosh, yes.
So stressful and, so there's a lot of things like that. But I think all in all, if you're feeling like you have that process and you're working through it, then you can feel confident that you're like, okay, I'm going in the right direction.
Yes.
I'm going to get there. And, now
and
that
even
you're
if
there,
it goes up a little bit each time, like, if you were at 40%, but then the next time you're at 38 or, it's every little bit counts. So
yeah, exactly. Yep. And all those little differences can add up because now you have an employee that's full-time.
Yes.
You have more expenses as your business grows, having a system that can support you, make sure you're adding, and who knows, maybe next year you'll raise your prices a little bit and, keep growing so that you can have a bigger team and more things like that, because that's definitely something that I feel like is super important. I know some other EveryStem members who are like, I'm doing really well where I'm at. And I'm like, okay, bump up that markup just by 0.2, go from a 3 times markup to a 3.2 times markup or something like that. Just enough to kind of, give yourself a little bit of a raise.
Yes.
Well, we work so hard.
You can even experiment with it a little bit and just see, if I did this on this one, and maybe you're not actually going to do it, but just kind of see how things would look if you added a little bit more here and there. I've done that in the past, where I've obviously in the off season, but just things a little bit here and there, even from past weddings. Like if I had charged XYZ, what would it have been? So it's kind of nice to be able to go back and see previous events and things like that to refer to as well, because then you can kind of see where you were.
Yeah, using it as kind of a learning experience and being able to experiment with different pricing is huge. And I think that if you're doing that by hand, yes, you can do it, but it's going to take a significant amount of time. If you're doing it in EveryStem, make a copy of the event, make a few changes, look at what the suggested retail would be and say, okay, well, the system is saying, if I do this again, I should really be charging, instead of 500, I should really be charging 800 or whatever it is. That can be so helpful just to kind of keep us in mind, because we always, I don't know if you do this, but I tend to if I'm guessing, I'll underestimate a little bit, and we all tend to do that. And then it's like, okay, if we underestimate on half of what we're selling, and then we have to fulfill those underestimated orders, we're going to be in a kind of a position where we're not making the money that we want to be making.
Especially for, you know, a lot of weddings have those big installations and things like that that are even more popular, you know, the open arches and the ground altars and all that stuff. I've seen, because I am on a lot of those florist Facebook groups, and people just have no idea what to charge for that. And it's, it's very, you don't even know how much to put in it. So it's nice to be able to see if I was going to add, you know, this much, I should charge that, or whatever the case is, depending on the piece. But I think as on Pinterest, a lot of these really big fancy things get more and more popular. It's helpful for that as well. Because, you know, centerpieces are kind of like easy to price out, but how do you do like a 12-foot piece on a tree?
Yep.
Hand, I don't know. It's just for that.
Yeah, it can be challenging, really challenging. And I think going through that process of kind of saying, okay, and I think I have if anybody's interested in, who's watching this, needs a kind of a, you know, some advice on how to go through that process. I think I have a presentation on like 7 steps to building a big installation.
Mhm.
But, you know, thinking about who, like the labor, who's going to build it, what do you need for the mechanics? What kind of floral material do you need? And then kind of working through that sensically and using a system like EveryStem just to kind of build all that pricing in can be really helpful, because then you're not just kind of doing that guesswork of like, well, I think it could be anywhere from, you know, 500 to 2,000, you know, you want to be able to know, especially with adding in some of those hard goods and things like that.
Yeah, big time.
Well, is there anything, Hylary, that you would like to let somebody who's interested in EveryStem, or somebody who just kind of is trying to figure out better how to find a system for pricing, what you would say about your experience with EveryStem, and, you know, anything that you did as you became a member and started learning that made it a little bit easier for you to kind of adapt it and make it your go-to system?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, especially, you know, like I've said, organization is just important to me as a person. So I like that. Timeliness and everything are important to me. But so one thing to think about that I think is really, especially when you're a small business owner, is the value of your time is so, it's like immeasurable. You can't really quantify that, especially, you know, I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, they're both school age. So having something like this for me was not only super valuable for me to be able to do the proper margins and make sure I'm organized and feel good about what I'm getting and that I have enough of this, that, and the other, and be able to provide good customer service, but just being able to have more time to spend with my kids, or just, you know, doing all the things that sometimes get neglected during wedding season. As you're processing and working on a wedding and you have to order for this wedding, having that extra time saved by having EveryStem, to me, is like the biggest benefit of it. I mean, of all of the bells and whistles and everything that it has that are super nice, and being able to make more, you know, keep more money that we take in and all of that is wonderful. But having the extra time to be with my kids and my husband and my dog and my cat and all that stuff, that is like the biggest for me, the biggest thing I could advocate for, because it's very easy, especially when you're getting started in this and it's very exciting and you want to just give 110% on everything. It's very easy to neglect other things in life. And so that to me is like the most crucial thing that you can't really quantify. You know, I feel like EveryStem is super duper duper reasonably priced anyway, but there's no price that you can put on saving time like that. So that's my biggest, you know, advertisement, I guess, for it, is the time saved and the time that's better spent doing other things, even if it's better spent working on the business, but also having time to just relax even. So that would be the biggest advertisement I could give for it. And just in terms of integrating it into what we were already doing, at the beginning, like I mentioned, you know, you have to put your library together. That took a little bit of time, but I just sat down for a good couple days and just did that. So I think realizing that it's going to take a little bit of time. It's really not that much time to get things kind of started and figure it out, not to be intimidated by that process. I know technology can be intimidating to different people for a variety of reasons, but for me, I'm pretty tech savvy, so it was fairly simple to get that up and rolling. And I just spent a couple of days, maybe on an off week, inputting everything, going through all the prices, making sure that I had the different colors, the different seasons of things like that. So that part took a little bit of time, but once you get through that, it really is very seamless to use it. I mean, there's not really any tricks to it. There's not any like secrets that you need to know to get it to work or anything like that. It's just putting in a little bit of time to learn it, get it customized to you, figure out what template, if you want to use a template, or if the basic template that comes with the format for each wedding is sufficient. That is really the only thing that's required to get it up and running. It really was a very smooth transition for us. I mean, if you're using some other kind of electronic system that might need some integration in some way, that might be a time where you need like a tech person, but it was very simple. I've talked to other florists about EveryStem because I, just sort of go around shouting about it from the rooftops sometimes, but they're like, oh, I don't know. It's on the computer. I don't know. I don't know. It's a little tricky. It's really not. It's very simple. I mean, we all spend a lot of time online anyway, so it's nothing is intimidating. It's very, very easy to use, but I think it's, in terms of the organization, the money saved, the confidence and the time saved to be able to do other things, that is like why I love it so much.
It just goes to show that when something is made by a florist,
Yes,
for florists, and we
Mhm.
understand that we need this to be simple, we need
Mhm.
this program to do what it needs to do and not a ton of other stuff,
Yes,
but getting members who really love it so much that they're willing to go out of their way to share it with other people, that means the world to me, because that means we're doing something right. So it
yeah,
makes me so happy
absolutely.
to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just having been a librarian as long as I was, we had a lot of electronic things, databases and things that we did. And I was on committees and stuff I evaluated all that stuff. So I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit more than I think other people might about it. And I think that's why I'm like a big advocate for it, because I'm like, this is something really helpful. It's worth every penny.
I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk
Thank
to me about
you.
this,
Yeah,
and
of
for being
course.
a member of EveryStem, and yeah, just sharing with other florists who are looking for a solution what you've gone through. We're all struggling through this business owner thing, and we're all
Yeah.
trying to figure out what is right for us and what's the most combination of an affordable program that's actually going to
Mhm.
work,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.